Welcome to Head to Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Markham. This bi-weekly podcast is created to be a safe space to admit what we truly believe in our hearts. And many of us, when we take the time to truly examine ourselves, will find some sort of shame, fear, or lies hiding in there. And it is never God's will for us to stay in bondage to those. It's His truth that sets us free from them. But there's a huge difference between having biblical knowledge floating around in our heads and actually believing that it's true. Until God's truth makes its way into our hearts, nothing changes. We'll be doing a mix of solo episodes and interviews with friends who have experienced the freedom that comes when head knowledge becomes heart knowledge. The truth will set you free so you can walk every day in the freedom God desires for you. It's time to let go of shame, fear, and lies. Those aren't yours to carry. Thanks for joining us. Before your episode starts, I know many of you are in your post-grad era, whether that means you literally graduated college last month, or you've been out of college for a couple years now and you just feel stuck in a job you don't like, or you don't want to stay in the job that's not going down the career path you ultimately want to start. I've created a resource to help anyone who needs to pivot their plans, find a job, or get some clear direction for their life, or maybe all three. There's two things. So if you have no idea what your next step is, you can take a free workshop that's called How to Decide Your Next Steps in 30 Minutes to move from confusion to clarity in just a short amount of time. And the second thing is if you want to land a job you'll actually enjoy really soon, I created an online course that has everything you need to get there way quicker than if you were trying to figure it all out on your own. I certainly did not know how to do any of the job stuff well until I sought help from a job coach last year. And that support helped me land the job I actually really wanted immediately after I graduated. And maybe you're saying, but Jenny, that's the thing. I don't have a good steady income yet or a high enough income to live off of, which is why I need a different job. Exactly. That's why I set the pre-sale price at just $29 for you for the online course. But it's only going to be $29 until June 14th. That's 1 week from the day this episode releases. So after that, the price is going to go up. You want to jump in when it's only $29. The link to these two resources is the first thing you'll see listed in the show notes. Click on that link to land the job that's right for you in this season. So without further ado, let's jump into your episode. Welcome back to Head to Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Markham. I'm bringing back for the second time a very popular guest. Now, she won't admit it, but her episode went off the charts. So her first episode was about living an abundant single life. But now we're talking about something different because I finally convinced her to do it a second time. Christine, please introduce yourself. You got to say a different fun fact than you did last time.
My name is Christine. Do I say like where I work, how I know you?
Yeah. As much detail as you want.
I guess I was on before, so people probably know. We both worked at the same university together. I'm the student care services manager there. Jenny no longer works with me. She has betrayed me and abandoned me, but I still love her. So that's special. And then a fun fact, I'm a sci-fi fantasy nerd. I've been to Comic-Con. I will go again if the opportunity arises. I've been like 3 times. I don't dress up. I don't cosplay, but I respect people that do.
But I have major respect for that.
I'm impressed for those that do.
Wow. I didn't know you've been to Comic-Con.
Yeah, but...
Where was it?
It's the Minneapolis one.
Okay.
Which I know isn't like the big one. But I mean, there were lots of people here.
Yeah.
You know? Like...
Wow.
People from like big actors from like Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who.
Wow.
Freddy Krueger.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Charlie Sheen. I don't know why he was at Comic-Con, but.
Wow. Okay, I knew you were a sci-fi fan from like your favorite movies.
Yeah.
Everything like that. But I didn't realize it went to that deep level.
I put someone in outer space. I love it. Give me an elf in a forest. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was going to do it myself.
I wanted this
but you
so
did it for
badly.
me. Okay, why don't you take it away and tell us, what have you been set free from?
All right, so a huge thing I've been set free from is bitterness and unforgiveness towards my dad. And so I can give the backstory of that, because when I speak on forgiveness, it helps when I refer to this. So my dad was pretty much out of my life by the age of 2. I believe it was 2 is when he left. So he had a pretty traumatic childhood, grew up in poverty, and at 9 years old, he had been recruited by adults to sell drugs. And so during that time, he also got addicted to it. And so it was really his battle his whole life. And he went into the Army, met my mom, and then was trying to be clean, but just couldn't do it. And especially falling back more. I think he was even more addicted to money than to drugs. And so he could get money fast by selling. And so by the time I was 2, he was in prison, and my mom ended up divorcing him because of, we were just going bankrupt, and it wasn't a safe environment for us. So I only knew him as this, I didn't know he did drugs until I was older, but I knew he wasn't there, but I didn't know why. And I loved him so much. And so he would write letters to us whenever he was in prison, but whenever he got out, he would disappear. So maybe for like 3 years, we're writing all the time, and then he's out and he just disappears. And during that time, he would make all these promises, like, I'm going to get a house. You guys can come stay with me. I'm going to take you on vacations. I'm going to send you this in the mail, like tons of just broken promises. And that happened throughout my life. He never paid child support. He didn't care for us in any way. And by the time I was 18 or 19, I really started to hate him, realizing like, wait a second, who is this guy that I'm talking to? He never follows through with what he says. Then I went to college and was hearing a little bit on forgiveness and realizing like, maybe I need to forgive him. And so I didn't even know what forgiveness meant. People don't really explain it. I just know, well, the Bible says it. I'm going to forgive. Yeah. So I just said, I forgive my dad. Mm-hmm. And in the process, I was like, he had just started emailing me because he'd been in prison again, and no longer letters. Now they had access to computers. So I was getting these emails, and I was like, you know what? I have forgiven him. He has to feel terrible for what he's done. And I just I want to get it out there. Like, I have forgiven you, but I want you in my life or out. Like, in and out is too hard. So I want this relationship with you. So I emailed him and let him know that. I even had some friends read it beforehand and be like, does this sound okay? And then he wrote back saying, I never wanted kids in the first place, and I'm not sorry for anything. And so it was just devastating, because I was definitely didn't realize it, but I wanted to hear him say, or see him say, like, I'm sorry. I wish that I'd been in your life. You're beautiful. I love you. Like all the things I'm just dying to hear my dad say. And it just like that, it was like taken away from me to the point where, it's no child should hear a parent say, I never wanted you. And so it was in that moment and through that God started speaking to me. Can you forgive if he's never sorry? And I realized I hadn't really forgiven him. I was waiting for an apology. I was waiting for him to pursue me and to reconcile and heal until I could let it go. And so that's when I realized the cost of forgiveness is incredibly great. And it feels unfair, except after walking through it, I see God's kindness in it, because it actually set me free from so many things. And layers would come as I was walking through forgiveness. But I forgave him, but I also never wanted to see his face again. It's just like, I'm going to forgive him. I'm going to work through this, but I don't have to be in a relationship with him. And that's true. Like, he hasn't shown himself to be anything healthy or helpful to me in my life. So I just wasn't speaking to him. And then I remember one time I was going to go visit my aunt, and I had found out that my dad had just gotten out of prison. And I don't know the correct term for it, if he was under house arrest or parole, but he had like an ankle bracelet, and he had to stay. He couldn't leave her home only except between certain hours. And so I was going to back out of this trip. I haven't seen my dad since I was 9 at this point. And so I was probably like in my late 20s, and I was going to cancel. And then I had a dream that night that my dad had killed himself. And in my dream, I'm weeping, and someone came up to me and said, why are you crying? You didn't want to see him again. And I said, yeah, but now I don't have the chance to see him again. And when I woke up, I was like, oh, crap. Like, maybe I'll go. Mm-hmm. So, and I'd remembered also years ago, someone was praying for me, and they were like, do you know your dad? And I was like, not really. And they were like, I just feel like God's saying one day you're going to see him, and it's really important for him. It's not about you. And I'd already gone through a lot of healing, so it wasn't like I was putting myself in this extremely vulnerable place where it's just like to be ripped apart in front of him. I was starting to find out who I was outside of needing his love and approval. So I went and I saw him, and it was actually really incredible. He never once asked me about myself. He never ever said he was sorry. There was nothing there on his end, but I could tell I'd forgiven him because I had compassion on him. I just saw this broken man full of trauma that couldn't love me. And it was just I was almost seeing this stunted little 9-year-old boy trying to prove himself to the world. And so I just saw a huge shift in me that was really incredible because I had hated him so much. And that's not to say that it was easy, because after that trip, he'd never done this before. He started asking me for money. And that made me so angry, so furious. And I remember I'll wrap this story up in a moment. He was sending me a letter. He's like, hey, I don't have money for my phone bill. Will you send me $25 and write me a note? And I was just like, what? I'm done. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to spend a life of having this man ask me for things if this is what it means, to be in relationship with him. And I remember I just stopped. I didn't respond to him, and I felt like I was highlighting the book Chasing the Dragon by Jackie Pullinger. Do you know that book?
No.
It's such a good book. It's really this woman that moves to China and becomes a mother to drug lords. She just is living in right in the depths of the city that's full of drug dealers and everything. And her story's insane, and I'm just reading it and I'm like, God, this is incredible. If you want me to go to drug dealers, I will. And I was just like, why is he highlighting this so strongly? Am I going to move to China and be a mother to drug dealers? And then I remember I was just brushing my teeth thinking about that. And God spoke to me, and he was just like, you already have a drug dealer in your life. And I was just like,
not that one.
Not that one. That one has broken my heart too many times. I can do someone else's parent who's a drug dealer, but not my own. And I just saw God inviting me into something new in this journey of forgiveness, and I decided to accept it. I wrestled with him through it, and I was like, all right, I'll do it. And I felt like God was highlighting me to write him a note and send him $25. And I was just like, but what if you're not supposed to send drug dealers money, blah blah blah, and I just felt like God was, and I didn't feel like I was saying every time he wants something, give it to him. But in this moment, write him a letter, send him the money. And I just wrote the note, and I was going to just sign my name. And I felt like God said, sign it, or tell him you love him and sign it, your daughter, Christine. And I was just like, no, I'm so mad at him. But I thought about him, do I love him? And I was like, yeah, actually, when I was with him, I actually felt love for him. And then I'm like, and I'm his daughter, so that's not a lie. So I just wrote it, sent it to him. And I mean, I have no idea. He didn't write me again after that for a year or ask me for money. But we stayed in relationship off and on through messages and emails. And then a year and a half ago, I was told that he was in the hospital dying, and he had been on the streets not long before that. And so he just didn't have anything. And so my brother and I went, and it was just amazing to see where forgiveness led me, because I never could have done this, but I spent the last week of his life bathing him and singing over him, and just showing him honor and dignity, and releasing him from any pain that maybe he did have deep down inside towards what he had done to us. And it was so holy and beautiful to watch that happen. And again, he never apologized. It wasn't anything on his end, but I could see the love of God over my dad's life, to be he loves my dad. When I found out my dad was dying, I said, God, have mercy on him. Have mercy on him for all the things that he's done. And as I was there, realizing through that process, I asked for mercy, and he's showing him mercy through me. He's answering my prayer through me, and just getting to love him so he wasn't alone. And so that I don't know, it was just this room full of the Spirit of God, and it was incredible. And so forgiveness, it doesn't always lead to that type of ending of a story. But it always leads to healing, even if it's just for ourselves, that we get to move on and forward. So that's what I was set free from, which, maybe it's too long of a story, but I'm like, this is an important piece while I'm sharing on forgiveness, because it's what's formed my understanding of forgiveness.
Well, you can tell by those 2 points in the story where, one, you wrote a letter saying, I forgive you, but you're really just fishing. You just wanted to hear, I'm sorry. You wanted to hear his apology and repentance.
Yeah.
That would have been ideal, I guess.
Yeah.
But then the second time, when you sent him money and a note, your motivation was completely different.
Yeah.
You had walked through a lot where you let it go and you weren't actually fishing for anything.
Yeah.
You were actually like, should I give this?
Yeah.
What if he goes and buys more?
What's he going to do with
I
this?
don't know. You were just following God's leading, though.
Yeah.
That's insane. It's insanity. What are some of the most important things you've learned about forgiveness? That can also include what it isn't.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing that I've learned throughout forgiveness. And even when I teach on it, I always start with this is what forgiveness is not. And forgiveness isn't denying the seriousness of an offense or condoning it. It doesn't mean that we excuse it and say that that was okay, or that God is even saying what happened to us is okay. It doesn't mean forgetting. A lot of times people say forgive and forget. I'm like, I can't forget that my dad left me. Like, that cannot leave my mind. Mm-hmm. But I can actually heal from that and see God's redemptive story. Of course, small things we can forgive. We can forget those types of things. But those bigger things stay with us. But we get to see a redemptive story. It does not mean that it's safe to be in relationship with the offender. It doesn't mean, if someone was an abuser, or my dad could have been, he could have been an unsafe person in a lot of ways. I had boundaries around a lot of our relationship, but it doesn't mean they're safe or that we should be in relationship with them. It doesn't mean that trust is restored. Trust has to heal, and people have to show that they have changed. Like with my dad, trust could have grown if he had stepped up and if he had shown up in my life, but it never did. There wasn't trust there. It doesn't mean an offender's actions should be covered up. So, if there's a teacher that's been abusing a student, that student might forgive, but also that teacher needs accountability and needs to have the police called on him or whatever. It doesn't mean to hide people's actions. And forgiveness doesn't mean that everything is healed. I always say this, that forgiveness is like taking a cork out of a bottle. And once that piece is out, all the other pain can come to the surface. So I forgave my dad, but I had then to work through lies, through the pain of being abandoned, through understanding God as a father, because I just didn't even think God wanted to be with me if my own dad didn't want to be with me. So there was just layers of healing that came after that piece of forgiveness. I mean, there's so many other important things, but those are the main things where I'm like, these ones are really important to understand.
Okay. So much of what forgiveness is an inward work that we work through individually.
Yeah.
So it can be really hard to make it feel concrete. But what are the concrete steps? If you could make anything concrete, what are those practical steps you can take to forgive someone?
For me, and I think it could be different for anyone or for everyone, but for me, there are certain things that I do when I'm forgiving and when I'm helping people forgive. The first one is I need to understand what forgiveness is. Like when I forgave my dad back when I was 18, 19, I didn't know what it meant. It's just a phrase I'm saying. But to actually understand first that it's not excusing what happened, but I'm getting out of the judgment seat and I'm letting God sit there to be like, God, there is a judge that will judge this, and I get to move on from this. I don't want to be bound to the offense and the sins of this person. I want to heal and move forward. So it just helps me be like, okay, God, you be the judge of this. I trust you with this, and I want to forgive them and move forward from this. So that's an important piece. It also helped me to understand people, to hear stories. So even if I'm helping someone work through forgiveness and they're having a hard time, I might share a piece of my own story to help them understand and relate. I'm not going to, if I'm helping them forgive, I'm not going to be like, let me tell you my whole story.
Sit down, buckle up.
Sit down, listen to this. That's not a time to override it with your whole journey, but I might share an aspect to help people work through it. We also need to have compassion on ourselves while we're working through it, because it's really, really hard to forgive. It has taken me years to forgive some people. It has not been, I'm a bitter girl. I love just thinking and festering in my mind when someone hurts me, all the things I want to say back to them.
It feels really good.
Yeah,
to
it's just
that
I'm telling you off every night before I go to bed.
You just feel justified and right.
Exactly.
And I feel like anyone who says, well, no, I don't like being bitter. Well, yeah, there's a reason. You haven't let go of it yet, because it does feel good.
It does. And some people I know can forgive much faster than me. It is not easy for me. And so but then I can get mad at myself. And so just to be like, okay, there's a lot of pain here. I'm going to have some compassion, and I need to start working through this. Letting go for the need of an apology. I needed to let go of waiting for my dad to say I'm sorry. So when I'm forgiving, to be like, do I need an apology from this person to forgive? No, I'm going to forgive even if they're not sorry. It really helps to process the pain of the offense. And so even maybe bringing a friend in or someone that will do prayer ministry or a counselor to talk about that. But when I'm working through it, I'm very specific what I'm forgiving a person for. So for my dad, it would be, I want to forgive my dad for leaving our family and never providing financially so that we struggled with poverty. It's not okay what he did, but I choose to forgive him for this. I forgive him because of him, I believe that not even God wanted to be with me. Like, it's just listing through the very specifics, not just like, I forgive him for everything. Because I want to see, what has he done that's harmed me? And am I willing to let that go to God and forgive him for it, or whoever it is? And then it also helps to not compare your story. I think when we compare our stories to others, it's a roadblock to us forgiving. So I could be like, well, people have had way more horrific abuse than I have, or way more whatever than me. And then it minimizes my story. But this is my story. And so it's not to compare it to somebody else's. Because I've worked with so many people where they've never forgiven because they're like, it wasn't that bad what happened. It's just like, but we need to acknowledge sin is sin or hurt is hurt. And then that helps us to go to that place to actually forgive. To be like, okay, yeah, that wasn't okay. I don't have to compare it to everybody else. This was my journey and it was painful. And then also reminding yourself that you're in a process. Forgiveness for me doesn't happen overnight. Unless it's a small thing, I need to keep processing and working through that. And then especially if I'm helping someone work through it, I don't force it. I can't force someone to forgive. Like, someone can't force me to forgive. And so sometimes people just need a little bit of time or maybe to work through some trauma first. And so, for me, if I'm not ready, I'll invite God in to say, God, help me get to the point so that I can forgive. And what do I need to do to start that process? And then, were you going to say something?
Well, wasn't there when you were first doing this, first forgiving your dad, wasn't there a person who was like, you got to forgive?
Yeah.
You got to forgive right now.
Yeah, someone was saying, and I was so angry. I was just like, you don't understand. Like, it feels like that injustice. Like, my story's just, because to me, I'm like, it's excusing it. It's not like I'm not there. I didn't understand those things yet. And so it helped me to like pause and be like, at least give me time to think about this and really like know what I'm choosing to do. So yeah, we don't force that on people. And then sometimes in the midst of forgiveness, the person we can't let go of the most is ourselves. So we also need to explore, do I need to forgive myself for something? Because maybe it's easier to forgive others, but we hold stuff against ourselves. And so when I'm working through forgiveness, I also need to be like, am I holding something against myself that needs to be dealt with? So yeah, it's processing through it. It's letting people into that journey. It's really listing out those offenses. It's remembering that it doesn't excuse it. It's just saying God is the judge of this. And I like to do it with people. Typically, if it's a huge thing. Smaller things, I got that. And even big things I can, but there's something helpful to have someone help me maneuver that.
It's almost like accountability. Not that person is then checking up on you and saying, you still forgiving? You still forgiving? But it's kind of like there's a witness to the inward work.
They were, I love that, a witness to that. And someone I can talk to and like, I'm struggling today.
Yeah.
I thought I forgave, and they could be like, you did, but it's a process. So let's, do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, it is easier when at least someone knows that you've chosen to do that and they can understand where you're at in the process.
Right.
So I may or may not be asking this part for myself, but what happens when, the person won't change their behavior and you're in this struggle of like, okay, should I be praying that they change their behavior? And God can change them, but I don't know if they're going to choose that.
Right.
So should you keep expecting that?
Yeah, I try to believe the best and know that people can change. I know that's possible, but I don't expect it or put my hope in it. Like for me, my dad never changed. So I had been waiting the rest of his life to see that happen. And it was actually extremely healing for me when I let go of the expectation that he would change. It helped me accept where it was at and to actually look at it from a new perspective of like, but what if he never changes? What if he never tells me? Like, because I was waiting for him to do the right thing, to say he's sorry, to tell me he loved me. There's nothing I wanted more than for him to tell me he thought I was beautiful. I would send him pictures all the time, hoping he'd be like, oh, you're such a beautiful daughter. Never once. I would just be waiting, disappointed. What's crazy is the end of his life, he started asking for pictures all the time. And I remember one time, and I was sending pictures, and I was like, wow, one time this meant the world. This would have meant the world to me, but this doesn't mean anything to me. Not in like, I don't care, but I'm just like, I'm so indifferent.
You just don't need.
I don't need you to tell me I'm beautiful. I don't need you to tell me. So it let goes of a need of what I think I need, because I can be okay if I don't have that.
Yeah.
If I go through that journey of healing. So for me, when I was able to accept it, and for my dad to like say the thing that he said that was so painful about never wanting me, even though it sounds crazy, it was almost the best thing that could have happened to me, because it flipped my mind to be like, oh, I need to shift my perspective here and no longer look to you to change something. You will never be a father to me. And I need to let go of that dream, and I'm going to look to God to be that father to me. And, this is an extreme scenario, but for me, acceptance of where it's at and knowing it might not change helped me move on. Yeah. And be able to accept where that person is at. So even but it doesn't mean I never prayed for him or wasn't asking for that change in his life, but it just wasn't a main focus for me. So I think, and it's going to be different for everyone, how the Lord might lead them and walk them through it. But I think acceptance is actually really helpful, while also knowing that God can do anything for that person. And again, this is case by case, because this is my dad who wasn't that present in my life. What if this is about a spouse? Who that's a whole other story. And there I would recommend you need community. You need someone that you can process with, because it's too hard to figure these things out alone. Even if it's, I don't want to share with other people because this is my spouse, well then meet with a therapist or somebody, because it's painful and it's hard, and it's really important to work through it. Yeah.
But it also sounds like you're saying that each person will need to follow the Holy Spirit's promptings in it. It could just be different. It could be different in different seasons too.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, has this ever happened where you're like, I truly have walked through a lot of forgiveness and everything's good for quite a while, but then something happens where you're like, oh yeah, am I still angry about that? Or is this anger just coming up again?
And because there's new things.
Yeah, there's new things that happen.
There are people, new offenses and new things. And that's where you take like the tools of forgiveness. And I remind this of students when they like maybe work through, because I work with students, if they're, forgiving someone in their life, but then they're going to go home and see them over break. And I'm like, that person might not have changed yet, but you're the one that gets to change through this process. So if they keep doing this thing, walk to the other room. Remember what we've talked about. We're like, okay, God, you be the judge of this. This isn't okay, but I'm not going to hold this. I will not. I like to talk about like bitter streams, because one time I was so bitter at someone, and God showed me a picture of this filthy, bitter stream, and then this really clean, beautiful stream. And he's like, you can drink from streams of bitterness or streams of living water. I was like, I want the living water, but that's costly.
It's an obvious choice, but it's hard.
Hard because I like to swim in bitterness.
I like to bathe in my own filth.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm very curious about your answer to this next question.
Okay.
How do you know when you truly have completely forgiven someone?
Okay, that is a hard one for me to answer.
Well, if you don't answer it exactly as I want you to, we're going to have big problems.
Then I'm done and you're never going to have me on again?
You would be fine with that.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so for me, I would look into this a lot to try and know, like, what's the answer? Because there are ways that you can know. And I would look into it, and the common thing that would come up is letting go of resentment, letting go of hatred, anger, a willingness to reconcile, emotional healing from the pain. And I agree with all of that. Those are things that I've even seen in my heart towards my dad. But it's also depending case by case, because that willingness to reconcile, again, if that person's not safe, I'm not going to advise to go reconcile with that person who abused you as a child. Unless there's a huge change and the Lord is leading and there's wisdom in that too. But I think I've noticed in myself that bitterness lessening. But what I don't think, because what can come up was like, then I should never be angry again. Sometimes I think about it, or I talk about my situation with my dad, and I'm angry. But I think that's important because it's just me acknowledging an injustice to my little self, that wasn't okay what happened. And so I don't think anger is a sign of that. And I think pain, because some people are like, I still have pain around. It's like, we're still healing. Like, there comes a point where maybe that pain isn't there, or maybe there is a pain that's there because there are such huge things that have happened. So I don't know that forgiveness means a pain-free life around that situation. But there is, for me, there is an anger and bitterness that started to shift for me. And it's that bitter piece that I hate. And I don't want that for anybody because it poisons us. Yeah. And it's just it just is gross inside. And it's, I wish I could just suck it out of everybody's hearts. Be like, this hurts, it's not worth it. So I think that's a big area, but it's all a process. And I don't think the process is bad. We all want to get to that point where forgiveness is past tense. Like, I forgave that person, but it's okay if it's still active. Like, it was okay when I would actively say, if someone's like, okay, have you forgiven your dad? It's like, I'm forgiving my dad. I can't say this is forgiven in past tense. And it's a great place to be. We're on a journey like that. Refined my character so much to work through that. If it had just been overnight, I would have missed out on a journey of character refinement that was happening in the midst of all of that, and this love that began to grow and develop in me. But again, I can't put my story on everyone. How it looks is different for different people, and how I would advise might be differently. But that, for me, has been a helpful thing to see. Like, it's okay if it is active still, and we're forgiving. But also, when I see that bitterness lessening in me, I know I'm getting to a next place with it.
You're getting somewhere.
I'm getting somewhere.
Somewhere.
Oh, it's rough.
Because that whole journey, let's say you started forgiving when you were like 19. Yeah. And then how long was that journey? How many years?
I mean, he died a year and a half ago. And it was probably, I'd say in my 30s is when the biggest shift happened. I think when I saw my dad I think I was maybe 32. It was like right at the end of my 20s and my early 30s where I was like, well, this has fully shifted. But then he starts asking me for money, and there's a whole new journey of like, what have you done? I'm finally free of bitterness and you're doing this.
Yeah. Well, maybe I think what you're saying makes sense. And that makes me feel better, makes every listener feel better. Of like, oh, thank God. It's not just a one and done. And when I do feel anger, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm doing something wrong. It's just kind of a flag. Yeah. That, okay, pay attention to that.
And I think religion torments us, that we have to be, like, I've met with people, they're like, I'm struggling at forgiving and I'm so afraid I'm going to die because I'm going to go to hell. And I'm just like, whoa. What?
Big jumps here.
You went through so much abuse. I've heard the worst stories, and then they say that. And I was like, you think that? Like, let's work through this, because that is not God. Like, that is not a loving father who's going to send you to hell because you are in the process of forgiving and you have pain and anger. Like, of course there's pain and of course there's anger, and it takes time. And again, I look at scripture and I would get offended by some verses because it was like, forgive or I'm not forgiving you. That was like what I'm hearing in God's tone.
Just like that.
And I'm just like okay, God. Exactly. Well, you don't. Did you see what my dad did? Or did you see what this person did? But when I actually went through the journey of forgiveness, I only was met with love and kindness, not a demanding, cruel God, but an incredibly loving God who I fell more in love with through that whole process, where I'm like, wow, I thought this was going to be awful, but you're better than I thought, and this is better than I thought. Yeah. But I couldn't go through it alone, and I just want to express that. Like, bring community, bring safe people in to help you if there's huge things that you can't work past, because it is hard.
Yeah. And this thing that feels so unfair to be asked to do is actually for your benefit.
Yeah, it is.
Who knew?
It's kindness towards us. And I love forgiveness. I also hate it.
But in the same breath.
But I love it. I also want to punch it in the face.
Well, you have mixed emotions about it. But,
it is. I see the fruit.
I see the fruit. I like the fruit.
It's worth it. But whenever a new thing comes up, I'm like, no.
Not again.
Okay, but let me swim in bitterness for at least 2 days, and then I'll start the process.
2 days to be bitter. I'll be back.
And then I'll try.
Christine, thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
I've heard this story 1,000 times. That's not true. Not 1,000.
Maybe like
I've heard
500.
it a lot, but I haven't gotten sick of it. I enjoy
Good, I'm
hearing
glad.
it literally every time. And I was working with you last year when your dad passed away.
Yeah.
And that was just like full circle because I got to see the end of that
Yeah, that's
and
true.
you walk through that. And that was a blessing to me because
Yeah.
I had only heard the beginning. And now I saw how he like tied it up at the end. That there weren't any loose ends with it.
Yeah, that's true. I was impressed with the end of that story. I was like, God, I never would have thought this was the ending. And
Yeah.
that the ending wasn't that he apologized. It was
Yeah.
that I could pour out an immense amount of love
Yeah.
and care and cry when he died and value his life.
Yeah. So thank you for being the guest a second time.
You're welcome.
I know it's a big ask to get a big star like you.
That's true. Can't wait for my paycheck.
Yeah.
Wait.
Wait a second.
What?
Anyway, well, I need to go now. Just kidding. So we hope that this really helped whoever is listening to this episode. We hope that it gave you some practical steps you can take, even though it is an inward work. Right. And we hope that you get into the right community that will hold you accountable and also be a witness to how God is moving in and through your life. So thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Head to Heart Podcast. It's a joy to record them and a joy to have you listen. Since you're a dedicated listener and made it to the very end of the episode, I have 2 gifts for you. One is that I have a free resource linked in the show notes for you. It's a resource created to help you take the truth you've learned either in this episode or in a previous one and apply it to your life. The second gift I have for you is access to my seasonal playlists. Every season, summer, fall, winter, spring, I create a regular playlist and a worship playlist that will be ongoing throughout the season. And you'll be able to follow it on Spotify if you need some good boogie tunes. Because, let's be honest, in another life, I would have been a DJ. So, you now have full access to meet all your seasonal music needs in the show notes. As always, I love hearing from you. So follow me on Instagram and send me a DM of how this episode impacted you. The handle is headtoheart_podcast. And if you would be so kind, leave a 5-star rating and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the website. By doing this, you'll help me get more amazing guests on the show in the future. I'll be releasing new episodes to you every other Friday, so stay tuned and thanks for joining us.